Brilliant.
So, hello, Dave. I'm very happy with the opportunity to have our traditional interview before your courses for Russia.
It's always a pleasure.
Today we have interview about mentoring, and we have several questions from our participants. I will ask them. So the first one, how do you understand that you are more useful for the client as a mentor than as a coach?
Well, it's interesting. In our current research on coach maturity, we find that the most mature, the most effective coaches, particularly at executive level, begin to merge their coaching with mentoring. They start to use more of themselves. And partly that's through using Gestalt and other ways of actually in our understanding of greater self-awareness. But it's also the drawing on their experience to build better rapport with the client, to be able to ask better questions. And so what a mentor brings is that wealth of experience that's relevant to the client, that helps the client feel more connected with them, but also is able to stimulate the client's thinking from inside knowledge of the kind of situations that the client has, and the ability to empathize more with what it's like to be in that role. I think that's why it's quite difficult for somebody to be really effective as a coach or as a mentor to a chief executive if they've never sat in a chief executive role. Now it's possible you could do quite a lot, but you can be more effective if you've been in that chair.
And I think it have a connection with my second question about specialization. So usually coaches are looking for their unique specialization, for their niche. How it is about in mentoring?
I think in mentoring, our niche becomes the special area that we have. If we have a particular area of knowledge, so it could be in health, or it could be in. We've got a big mentoring program for engineers, for example, for entrepreneurial engineers, global, but with a particular focus on Africa and Asia Pacific, and clearly the benefit here is the mentors do understand what it's like. They've been through the process of building a business around an invention. So that's a really valuable thing for them to have. Coaches tend to specialize in particular situations like life coaching, for example, and that's okay, that's fine, but that's it's quite limiting.
And you mentioned about mentor's maturity. So I have a question about mentor's journey. What does it consist of, or what it is at all, from your perspective?
Well, in many ways it's similar to the coach's journey, which is not surprising. And what our research on the coach's journey tells us is it's a process of letting go of very, very nice, neat goals, letting go of control of the conversation, letting go of the need to use your ego to have something to say, letting go of the need to have another question ready. It's all about letting go and actually really relaxing into the conversation and allowing the conversation to happen that needs to happen. And I think this is the same for both coaches and mentors. The more mature we become, the less we actually do, the more that we achieve.
Okay. Somewhere we will be there. What kind of support do mentors need during their journey to become a master? And how do your 3 modules program helps them?
The key thing is they need to reflect on their own. They need to reflect and learn with other mentors, and they need to reflect through supervision. So, and you can also add that they need to reflect with their mentee. So there's four foci of reflections here that really help that mentor to grow. It's all about becoming increasingly self-aware. One of my big areas of interest at the moment is the process of becomingness. And this is a word, it's not a word you'll find in the dictionary, but there's a process called liminality. Liminality is the state of being in between two other states. So between being cold and hot, for example. But you've got state here and state there, and in between there's a space, and you're in between that. And sometimes you're more towards one and more towards the other. But it's about but the difference with becoming this, it's working through liminality and creating and being aware of what's happening to you. And so what the mentor is able to do to grow into their role and become more mature as a mentor is to reflect in the moment about how they are evolving as a mentor. And that means that directs you towards all sorts of different learning, because you can see that will be helpful to me, and that will give me some ideas. So this process of being increasingly aware of how we are growing as an individual, and therefore as a mentor.
And you have 3 modules in the program. What is the emphasis of each module?
So the foundation module is primarily about helping you to understand what is mentoring, what does it do, what are the basic tools that you need to have to operate as a mentor. When we get to the practitioner level, we're looking at how you go beyond that, and how you're able to have much deeper conversations, and maybe and really sort of make it a true co-learning arrangement between you. When we get to senior practitioner, we're trying to go even deeper still, and it's not just about tools and techniques. It's about self-understanding, self-awareness, and the ability to work in mentoring across all sorts of situations. So we are able to use our wisdom in its various forms in multiple different situations. And when we define wisdom, we talk about wisdom having 3 types of wisdom. There's lean wisdom, which is very specific knowledge in an area of context. Then there's broad wisdom, which is the wisdom we get from having been around, from life and experience. And then there's meta wisdom, where we're able to combine our own life experiences and our own lean wisdom and broad wisdom with all sorts of reading and interest in theories and concepts and an eclectic understanding of what the world around us, so that we're able to offer far more interesting and far wider perspectives for our mentees to consider. We're in the business of provocation. We're provoking people's thinking, and when we get to this meta wisdom level, we're able to see the connections between all sorts of things and the issues that we're talking about with our mentee. So we bring a much wider menu to the table. It's a bit like going going to a restaurant and being told, yes, well, there's soup. Oh, there's soup. There we are. Yeah, this is Russia as it used to be, as I remember, and it was always red cabbage soup. I remember borscht every time. But that's skinny wisdom. But when we get to broad wisdom, it's saying, okay, well, here's a set meal, and you've got 3 choices. When we get to meta wisdom, we're saying, well, here's a smorgasbord. Here's a great banquet table, and you can choose from these things and mix and match your own dish that meets your palate. This is the difference.
And talking about depth and wisdom, could you highlight what will participants do during 1 month between 2 days of the 3rd module? What will happen between them?
Okay, they've really got to go and practice. Try out what they've learned. Go and not just do it with or to their mentees, but explore with their mentees the learning they're taking from that practice. Say to the mentee, I'm experimenting here, and get the mentees' feedback on how that works. So they'll be creating together.
Mm-hmm. Okay, very very interesting. And continuing the topic about depth and wisdom, what's the 3 main characteristics tell you that the mentor is a master is at master level?
Well, there are probably many more than 3, but I would say the first one is humility. The more adept we become as a mentor, the more we realize how minuscule we are in the big scheme of things. The more we recognize that our ego is actually a barrier to making mentoring work. And so humility, I think, is a fundamental characteristic. Second one I would focus on is compassion. We're compassionate not just to the people, the mentee that we're working with. We're compassionate towards the whole system of which they're a part. And we're also compassionate towards ourselves. We forgive ourselves more. And then the third one is courage. Courage is all about being able to question one's own assumptions, to be able to learn hard lessons, to admit that we're probably wrong. There's a lovely quote from Adam Grant's latest book, Think Again, where somebody says, if you can't look back to a year ago and say how stupid I was then, you probably haven't learnt anything in between. And I think it's such a beautiful quote. But I think I had a fourth one, which came out of our research, and that's connection. And this is the whole process by which we are connected. We are the instrument of connecting the individual with themselves, the mentee with their wider world, and also the many systems that are part of that create their identity and their evolving self. So it's that sense of wider connection with them and with the social movements and with so many other things.
Thank you. And could you share the most vivid memory of the beginning of your journey as a mentor? This is the last question.
Okay. I think it was I have to go back to my first mentor, who I didn't realize was a mentor. It didn't have a name for it, but he was my English teacher. And he was an amazing man. He was an arch eclectic. We'd have our English lesson. We'd have an English lesson, but he would deviate into architecture and history and algebra and astronomy and all sorts of things. He knew about everything, and enough to excite the interest of young people. And I think it's that eclecticism that I see characterizes so many of the great mentors that I've encountered and across time. It's that they are deeply interested in the whole of world, the whole of learning. They see learning as one of the reasons for being. If we're not learning, why are we here? And so it's that eclectic gathering of knowledge, experience, insights from almost anywhere that enables us to just be interested in everything. And I'll give you an example. This little book is a wonderful example. This little book was on a table in a restaurant that I was in the centre of England, and it was used for holding they were actually putting the candles on it on the books, and it wasn't ruined, unfortunately, but they were using it to hold candles. And I thought that's a waste here, but it was just an old book. And so in fact I bought it from them. I gave them some money just to buy the book, and it's a book of Herodotus, and it's one of it's absolutely wonderful, completely. I know the name, but I don't know very much about him. But it's full of fascinating data. Like, for example, when we talk about somebody being ostracized, I had no idea where it came from, but the word ostracized comes from the word oyster. And when the Greeks wanted, the ancient Greek citizens felt that somebody was becoming too big for their boots, too powerful, they would vote him or her into exile. And they would write they would vote by writing their name on an oyster shell, the inside of an oyster shell. So ostracize is ostracize. Yeah. Now, if you're fascinated by wonderful little details like that, then it's that capacity for wonder that I think makes an amazing mentor. And if we lose our sense of wonder, then we will never make a great mentor.
Thank you so much for this conversation, David.
It's a pleasure as always.
And I really miss your wisdom. So hope to see you in November.
Thank you. Well, to a dyslexic, wisdom spells wasdom.